Success doesn't begin with what you earn. It begins with how you think. Most people are busy chasing money, but the wealthy train their minds first. Because here's the truth. If your mind is poor, no amount of money will keep you rich. But if your mind is trained for growth, freedom, and discipline, then even with little, you can create much. Wealth is nothing more than the reflection of a mindset. Practice daily. So, if you want financial freedom, don't just work on your job, work on your mind. Train it, discipline it, and direct it. Because once your mindset shifts, your whole life shifts with it. Let me tell you something I learned very early in life. Success doesn't begin in your wallet. It begins in your head. You cannot have $1 million life with a 10-cent mindset. The way you think, the way you speak to yourself, the way you see the world, these things form the blueprint of your destiny. Before the bank account changes, before the opportunities arrive, before the world rewards you, it all begins in your mind. Thoughts are seeds, and those seeds grow into actions, habits, and results. But if the seed is faulty, if the soil is poisoned with doubt, excuses, or fear, then no matter how hard you work, no matter how many hours you put in, the harvest will come back empty. When I was young, I thought success was about effort alone. I thought if I worked harder than everyone else, that alone would secure me wealth. But I was wrong. I was working harder than some of the wealthiest people I knew, yet they were free and I was stuck. Why? Because they thought differently. They didn't just see work, they saw leverage, opportunity, systems. They trained their minds to spot what others missed. And that's when I realized the first fortune you must build is not financial, it's mental. You see, the mind is like a factory, and the raw materials you feed into it determine what comes out. Feed it doubt, and it produces hesitation. Feed it excuses, and it produces stagnation. But feed it belief, feed it courage, feed it possibilities, and it produces creativity, discipline, and wealth. That's why I say the greatest investment you can make is in the quality of your thinking. If you don't shift your thoughts, you'll repeat your past. Now, I know some people say, but I grew up poor, and that's just how I see the world. Listen, poverty is not only a condition of the pocket, it's often a condition of the mind. Two people can grow up with nothing. One says, I'll never get out of this, and he's right. Another says, I'll never stay in this, and he's right too. Same circumstances, different mindset, different destiny. So how do you shift your thinking? You have to train it. You have to consciously decide to replace limitations with possibilities. For example, if you've carried the belief that money is evil, replace it with, money is a tool for freedom and contribution. If you've believed, I'll never be wealthy, rewrite it as, I am capable of learning the skills and disciplines that lead to wealth. If your thought has been, success is for others, not me, change it to, success is available to anyone willing to pay the price. Every belief you carry either builds a prison around you or builds a path before you. Here's a simple exercise. Write down 5 limiting beliefs you've carried about money and success. Be honest with yourself. Then, right next to them, write 5 empowering beliefs that will serve you instead. Read them daily. Repeat them until they sink in. Because here's the truth. The world will try to convince you of your limitations every single day. But you must remind yourself of your possibilities every single morning. Success begins in the mind. If you can't see it there first, you'll never hold it in your hands. But once you believe differently, you'll act differently. And once you act differently, life will reward you differently. The bank account, the freedom, the legacy, it all follows the mind. Change your thoughts and you change your life. That's where the journey begins. Everything in life flows out of your philosophy. Your philosophy is simply the way you see the world, the filter through which you interpret events, opportunities, and challenges. And here's the truth. Your personal philosophy determines your personal economy. Not the government, not your boss, not your circumstances, your philosophy. Two people can be handed the same opportunity, the same amount of time, the same resources, and one will prosper while the other struggles. Why? Because their philosophies are different. One sees obstacles, the other sees openings. One sees limitations, the other sees possibilities. One says, I can't, while the other asks, how can I? I had to learn this the hard way. For a long time, I was working hard, but had little to show for it. My problem wasn't effort, it was philosophy. I was stuck in the thinking that wealth belonged to the lucky ones or those born with advantages. That philosophy kept me broke because it excused me from responsibility. The day I changed my philosophy was the day my life started to change. I shifted from waiting for something to happen to making something happen. I decided I wasn't going to live by excuses. I was going to live by principles. That shift turned my entire economy around. So the question is, how do you change your philosophy? The answer is simple, but powerful. You have to start consuming better ideas. Your mind is like a garden, and every book you read, every person you listen to, every conversation you engage in is planting seeds. If you let the wrong people plant weeds of doubt, negativity, and fear, your philosophy will shrink, and so will your life. But if you surround yourself with ideas that challenge you, mentors that inspire you, and wisdom that stretches you, your philosophy will expand, and so will your opportunities. Books were my first mentors. I read stories of people who rose from nothing and built fortunes, and I thought, if they can do it, why can't I? That idea alone shifted my perspective. I listened to men and women who taught me that success was not a matter of luck, but a matter of principles applied consistently. That single change, that shift in philosophy, was worth more than any paycheck I ever earned. And here's what I want you to catch. When you change your philosophy, your actions naturally follow. If you believe wealth is possible for you, you'll start looking for ways to create it. If you believe time is valuable, you'll stop wasting it. If you believe education is essential, you'll make room for it every day. The reverse is also true. If you believe money is evil, you'll push it away. If you believe success is reserved for others, you'll never pursue it. Your philosophy is the steering wheel of your life. It determines the direction you drive in. Now let's make this practical. Starting today, dedicate 30 minutes every single day to learning something that improves your money mindset. It doesn't have to be complicated. Read a book on wealth principles. Listen to an audio program while you drive, or watch a lecture from someone who has walked the path ahead of you. 30 minutes a day doesn't sound like much, but over a year, it adds up to more than 180 hours of focused learning. Imagine what that could do for your philosophy. Imagine how your perspective, your decisions, and your results would transform if you invested just a small portion of your time into feeding your mind with better ideas. Remember this, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And the greatest change begins in your philosophy. Once you decide to feed your mind the right ideas, everything else begins to shift. Your habits, your actions, your opportunities, your income, they all follow. Change your philosophy, and you will change your life. Most people spend their entire lives working for money, and they never stop long enough to ask themselves, when will my money start working for me? That's the real secret of wealth. Wages are good, but they only feed you for today. Wages cover the rent, pay the bills, and put food on the table, but they were never designed to make you free. Profits and investments. That's where freedom begins. That's when your money stops being a servant of your expenses and becomes a servant of your dreams. I remember the time when I lived paycheck to paycheck. I was working hard, but at the end of the month, the money was gone, and I had nothing to show for it except the cycle starting all over again. It didn't matter how many hours I worked if I didn't learn to redirect part of those wages into assets. I was just running on a treadmill, sweating hard, but going nowhere. The treadmill of wages is where most people live, and it's exhausting. Freedom doesn't come from how much you make at your job. It comes from what you do with what you make. The philosophy is simple. Don't just work for money, let money work for you. Money is a tool, and if you treat it right, it will start producing more of itself. Imagine planting a seed in the ground. That seed doesn't look like much at first, but given time, it multiplies into fruit, into trees, into an orchard. Your money is the same. Every dollar you invest wisely is a seed. The problem is, most people eat their seeds instead of planting them. They spend it all on consumption, new gadgets, nicer cars, bigger homes, and then wonder why their orchard never grows. Here's the strategy. You must start using your earned income as seed money to build assets. That means you commit to taking a portion of what comes in and putting it somewhere it can grow without you. Assets come in many forms. Stocks that pay dividends, real estate that earns rent, businesses that generate profit, or even digital products that sell while you sleep. The form doesn't matter as much as the principle. If you don't turn wages into assets, you'll always be trapped working for money instead of money working for you. I learned this when I began setting aside part of my income every single month. At first it felt small, almost insignificant, but consistency changed everything. Over time, the investments began to generate returns. That's when I understood leverage, when the dollars I had planted began to sprout more dollars. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it's inevitable if you stay disciplined. The hardest part is not making the money. The hardest part is having the discipline not to spend it all. So let's make this practical. Commit to setting aside 15 to 20% of your monthly income and direct it into investments or a side business. Automate it if you have to. Treat it like a non-negotiable bill you pay to your future self. At first, you'll hardly notice it, but give it a few years, and you'll see the difference between surviving on wages and thriving with assets. The small sacrifices of today are the seeds of tomorrow's abundance. Because at the end of the day, wages can feed you, but only assets can free you. Time is the one currency every single person is given in equal measure. Yet it's the one most often squandered as if it were infinite. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose possessions and replace them. But when you lose time, it's gone forever. That's why I've often said the greatest tragedy isn't being broke, it's being busy without purpose. People fill their days with endless activity, but at the end of the week, they've built nothing, created nothing, and advanced nowhere. If you want wealth, if you want freedom, you must treat time as your richest currency and spend it wisely. I remember a season in my life when I was working long hours, but most of that time was spent reacting, answering every phone call, attending every meeting, saying yes to every request. I thought I was being productive because I was busy, but all I was doing was running out the clock on my own dreams. It wasn't until I learned to guard my time like treasure that things began to change. I stopped letting distractions set the agenda and started choosing deliberately how I would spend each hour. That's when time began working for me instead of against me. The philosophy is simple. If you spend time only on consumption, your time vanishes with nothing left to show. If you spend time on creation and building, those hours echo far into the future. Think of it this way. An hour spent watching television is gone the moment the credits roll. But an hour spent learning a new skill, writing an idea, or building an asset continues to produce results long after the hour has passed. That's the difference between wasting time and investing time. One leaves you empty, the other leaves you wealthy. Here's the strategy. You must shift from being a consumer of time to a producer with time. That doesn't mean you never rest or enjoy yourself. Of course, leisure has its place, but the bulk of your hours should be spent on activities that create value, move you forward, and build something lasting. Time invested in reading, studying, creating, or connecting with the right people multiplies in return. It gives you leverage, opportunities, and results. I used to challenge myself with this thought. What would happen if I invested even 2 extra hours each day into building assets instead of consuming entertainment? Over a week, that's 14 hours. Over a year, that's more than 700 hours, the equivalent of working 17 extra full-time weeks on your future. Imagine what could be built with that kind of compound time. A business could be launched, a skill mastered, an investment portfolio started. That's the power of deliberately reallocating time. So here's a practical step to begin. For 1 week, track your time. Write it down, hour by hour. Where's it going? Once you see it on paper, you'll realize how many hours slip away unnoticed, scrolling, binge watching, or doing things that don't matter. Then take just one of those wasted hours each day and reallocate it into something productive, studying, finance, working on a side business, or building an asset. That single change can alter the entire trajectory of your life. Because money may put food on the table, but it's time invested wisely that builds the future you dream about. When you think about success, it's easy to count the numbers. How much money is in the bank, how many assets you've accumulated, how many things you can buy. But the truth is, none of that will matter the day you're gone. They'll remember your impact, not your income. They'll talk about your contribution, not your consumption. The real measure of success is legacy, the part of you that keeps living when you no longer walk this earth. Wealth without contribution is a hollow trophy. A rich life isn't about the things you collect. It's about the lives you touch and the difference you make. I've seen people accumulate fortunes and still feel empty because their wealth never extended beyond themselves. They built walls around their money but never bridges with their resources. And then I've seen others who, with much less, created legacies that changed families, communities, and even nations because they understood that wealth is only as meaningful as the good it allows you to do. I remember the first time I started giving seriously. At first, it was a small amount, something I thought wouldn't make much of a difference. But what surprised me wasn't just the impact on others, it was the impact on me. The act of giving reshaped how I viewed success. It shifted me from how much can I gain to how much can I contribute. And when that shift happens, wealth takes on a new purpose. Money becomes more than currency. It becomes a tool to build a future that outlives you. Here's the philosophy. Wealth without legacy dies with you, but wealth with contribution lives forever. That doesn't mean everyone needs to leave behind a foundation or fund a university. It means using what you have, your wisdom, your time, your resources, to plant seeds in others that grow long after you're gone. Maybe it's teaching your children principles of discipline and responsibility. Maybe it's mentoring someone who reminds you of yourself years ago. Maybe it's using your resources to create opportunities for those who didn't get the chances you did. The richest life is not measured in dollars, but in the stories people tell about how you touch their lives. The strategy is clear. Build not just for yourself, but with others in mind. When you're acquiring assets, think about how they can benefit your family for generations. When you're building a business, think about how many jobs and futures you can create. When you're investing your time, think about who you're raising up alongside you. This way, your wealth is no longer fragile or fleeting. It becomes rooted in something deeper, something enduring. A practical step to begin is to decide on one way you'll use your success to serve others. Maybe it's setting aside a percentage of your profits to support causes that matter to you. Maybe it's mentoring one person this year, teaching them the lessons you had to learn the hard way. Maybe it's offering opportunities to someone who simply needs a door opened. Don't underestimate the ripple effect of a single act of contribution. It can outlast your lifetime. Legacy isn't about what you leave for people. It's about what you leave in them. And when your wealth is tied to legacy, success is no longer temporary. It becomes eternal. If you really want to change your financial destiny, you must understand a simple principle. Money follows value, and value comes from solving problems. The world doesn't pay you for how hard you work. It pays you for the problems you solve. The bigger the problem, the bigger the paycheck. A janitor works hard, but the scope of the problem he solves is limited. A heart surgeon, on the other hand, tackles life and death challenges, and the marketplace rewards him accordingly. Wealth isn't about luck, and it isn't about waiting for opportunity to knock. It's about training yourself to spot the problems others either ignore or run away from, and then having the courage and creativity to bring solutions. I learned this lesson the hard way early in my career. For years, I worked long hours, but the money didn't flow. I finally realized it wasn't the hours that mattered, it was the value of the problem I was solving. Once I shifted my focus from how long can I work to what problem can I solve, my entire economy changed. Suddenly, doors opened, opportunities appeared, and money, which once seemed scarce, became a natural byproduct of contribution. The philosophy here is straightforward. Every fortune is tied to a solution. The wealthiest entrepreneurs didn't stumble into success. They solved something that millions were struggling with. Think about it. Henry Ford solved the problem of expensive transportation. Steve Jobs solved the problem of making technology simple and beautiful. Elon Musk is solving the problem of energy and transportation for the future. You don't need to be on their level, but you do need to develop their mindset. When everyone else sees frustration, you must see opportunity. The strategy is simple, but not easy. Start training yourself to ask better questions. Instead of saying, "Why is this happening?" start asking, "What solution does this require?" When others complain about inefficiencies, you investigate. When others are overwhelmed by obstacles, you ask, "How can this be improved?" The marketplace is overflowing with problems. Your wealth depends on whether you've trained your eyes to see them as doors rather than walls. And here's the truth. Most people are too busy complaining to notice. That gives you an advantage. If you can resist the habit of excuses and complaints and instead turn energy into creativity, you'll never run out of opportunities. And the practical step is where you put this into action. Sit down this week, take out a notebook, and write down 3 problems in your industry, in your community, or in the marketplace. Don't worry about whether you know how to solve them yet. Just write them down. Then brainstorm possible solutions. Push yourself to think creatively. Maybe the solution is a new product. Maybe it's a new system. Maybe it's a service delivered in a different way. The point is to practice the skill of seeing problems and attaching solutions. Because that skill is a money-making machine once you sharpen it. I've always said, if you want more money, bring more value. If you want to double your income, solve twice the problems. If you want to be wealthy, solve problems that affect hundreds, thousands, or millions. The path to riches isn't hidden, it's in plain sight, disguised as problems, waiting for solutions. And the day you stop avoiding them and start solving them is the day wealth begins to chase you instead of you chasing it. One of the great lessons in building wealth is learning to reverse the natural habits that keep most people broke. The average person gets a paycheck, takes care of their bills, spends on lifestyle, and if anything is left over, they save. But that order is the reason most never move beyond survival. They've got it backward. Wealthy people save first and spend what's left. They treat saving as a priority, not an afterthought. It's a shift in philosophy that seems small but makes all the difference, because it changes the way you relate to money. Instead of letting expenses dictate your future, you let your vision and discipline do the guiding. When I was young and broke, I told myself I'd start saving once I was making more money. But the truth is, I didn't have a money problem. I had a discipline problem. If you can't save $10 out of $100, you won't save $100 out of $1,000. The number doesn't matter, the habit does. And here's the secret. Saving isn't just about stacking money, it's about training your mind. Every time you pay yourself first, you're telling yourself, I'm building a future bigger than today's impulses. That's a powerful message to repeat with every paycheck. The strategy here is to make saving automatic, non-negotiable, and consistent. Most people fail at saving because they rely on willpower, and willpower is a weak partner in the face of temptation. But if you build a system where saving happens before you even touch the money, it removes the choice. Automate 10%, 15%, even 20% of your income into a savings or investment account. Do it before you pay the bills, before you buy the gadgets, before you spend a dime. At first it may feel uncomfortable. You'll think, but what if I can't cover everything else? That's when you discover how resourceful you can become. When you set saving as a priority, your mind finds ways to adjust your lifestyle. You learn to stretch dollars, cut waste, and make smarter decisions. Instead of saving what's left, you make sure there's something left because saving came first. I remember the first time I automated savings, even when it felt impossible. At the end of the month, I realized something surprising. I didn't miss it. Life adjusted. And month after month, that account started to grow. It was slow at first, almost laughable. But over time, it became the seed money for investments that paid me dividends, for opportunities I could never have touched if I hadn't had that habit in place. Saving first creates the foundation. It gives you capital to seize opportunities, to weather storms, and to invest in assets that set you free. The practical step is straightforward. Set up automatic transfers so you don't rely on memory or discipline. Pick a percentage, at least 10%, and let it move into a savings or investment account every payday. Make it sacred. Don't dip into it for vacations, gadgets, or impulse purchases. That's not savings. That's delayed spending. Real savings is untouchable. It's for building, not for bailing yourself out of poor decisions. Here's the truth. Money that's spent is gone, but money that's saved works for you. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the quiet discipline of saving before you spent was the habit that bought you freedom, opportunity, and peace of mind. One of the hardest lessons to grasp in the pursuit of wealth is patience. Human nature wants everything fast. We want the returns today, the success tomorrow, and the mansion by next year. But money built fast often disappears just as quickly. You've seen it before. Someone wins the lottery or strikes a lucky deal, and within a few years, it's all gone. Why? Because wealth without patience, without the character to sustain it, is like building a house on sand. It may look strong, but the first wave of bad decisions will wash it away. Real wealth, the kind that lasts, grows slowly, and steadily, brick by brick, habit by habit. I remember a young man once asking me, "How do I double my money quickly?" I smiled and said, "Well, fold it in half and put it in your pocket, because that's the only quick way." If you're serious about wealth, you have to give up the illusion of speed. You have to learn to trust the compound effect. Think of the seed you plant in the ground. If you're out there digging it up every day to see if it's growing, it'll never bear fruit. Money works the same way. Investments need time, discipline, and patience to multiply. The strategy is simple but difficult. Resist the temptation of shortcuts. Shortcuts seduce, but they rarely deliver. Instead, build habits that let compounding do the heavy lifting. When you consistently save, consistently invest, and consistently reinvest, you create a snowball effect. At first, it looks small, like nothing is happening. But as the years pass, that snowball grows bigger and faster, rolling down the hill of time until it becomes a force too big to stop. That's what patience does. It transforms ordinary contributions into extraordinary wealth. I had to learn this lesson myself. Early in my career, I wanted to skip the process. I thought if I worked harder and found the right big break, I'd leap into wealth. But every time I chased urgency, I ended up frustrated and sometimes broke. It wasn't until I disciplined myself to plant, water, and wait that I began to see real results. I bought a modest property, and for the first few years, it didn't seem like much. But as the years passed, the value grew, the rents increased, and suddenly, what looked insignificant had become a cornerstone of financial freedom. That's the beauty of patience. Time turns small seeds into forests. The practical step here is to commit to holding your investments for at least 5 to 10 years. Don't expect big returns overnight. The market will rise and fall. Some days you'll feel like you're losing. But remember, wealth isn't measured in days, it's measured in decades. The farmer doesn't panic every time it rains, and he doesn't rejoice every time the sun shines. He knows it's all part of the cycle. Your investments are no different. Stay steady, stay disciplined, and let time do its work. If you can master patience, you unlock one of the greatest secrets of wealth. Because urgency might give you thrills, but patience gives you freedom. And in the end, that freedom is worth the wait. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: money without wisdom vanishes, but wisdom multiplies money. You can hand a fortune to someone who doesn't understand how money works, and soon enough, it will disappear. But give just a little to someone who has learned the language of money, and watch them turn it into something great. Financial literacy is not optional. It is the foundation. Without it, wealth is like water in a bucket full of holes. It leaks away faster than you can fill it. Now, here's the philosophy. If you want to be wealthy, you must learn how money behaves. It has rules, it has patterns, it has laws, just like gravity. Ignore them, and you'll fall. Respect them, and you can rise. That's why people who focus only on earning often stay stuck. They make good wages, but without understanding cash flow, equity, return on investment, or the power of compounding, they spend it or lose it. Money, in this sense, is neutral. It flows toward those who understand it and away from those who don't. The strategy is simple. You must learn the language of money. Think about it. If you traveled to a foreign country and didn't speak the language, you'd get lost. You'd be taken advantage of. You'd always depend on others to translate for you. That's exactly how most people live financially. They depend on the bank, the employer, the advisor, or even luck to translate money for them. But the wealthy learn to speak the language themselves. They know what equity means, they know what cash flow is, they understand the difference between assets and liabilities, and they can calculate ROI before making a move. This isn't about being a financial genius. It's about being informed enough to make smart, intentional decisions with what you have. I'll give you an example. Early on, I had a friend who earned nearly 3 times what I did at the time. His paycheck was huge compared to mine. But 5 years later, I had more saved and invested than he did. Why? Because he didn't understand money, he understood spending. He could tell you the price of the latest gadgets, vacations, and cars, but he couldn't tell you how compounding interest worked or what made a good investment. I, on the other hand, decided to dedicate just a little bit of time each week to learning the basics. I read books, I studied investments, I listened to people who were already successful. That little habit changed everything. It wasn't the size of my paycheck that made the difference. It was the size of my understanding. The practical step here is straightforward. Dedicate 1 hour a week to studying finance, investments, and economics. Just 1 hour. That's less time than most people spend scrolling on their phones every day. Imagine what could happen in a year if you replaced 1 hour of entertainment with 1 hour of financial education. At the end of that year, you wouldn't just know more, you'd see opportunities that were invisible to you before. You'd start to notice patterns, ask better questions, and make smarter decisions. Knowledge compounds faster than money because once you have it, no one can take it away, and you can apply it again and again. Wealthy people aren't always smarter than the rest. They're just better informed. They read contracts before they sign them. They know when an opportunity is worth pursuing and when to walk away. They understand that small percentages matter because over time, those percentages add up to millions. So train yourself in this language. Treat financial literacy as your greatest asset, because it is. Money may come and go, but the wisdom to manage it will keep you free for a lifetime. And once you own that wisdom, you'll never look at a dollar the same way again. Here's what I've discovered. Money that simply sits still begins to lose its power. Inflation eats away at it, opportunities pass it by, and before long, what seemed like a lot looks smaller and smaller. Money is not meant to sleep. It's meant to move, to circulate, to multiply. You don't build wealth by only accumulating. You build it by multiplying. And this is the philosophy you must embrace. Money stored alone loses power. Money multiplied builds fortunes. Think about it. If you save $1, that's good. It's better than spending it. But if that same dollar is put to work, invested in a way that produces another dollar, and then that dollar goes out and produces another, soon you've created a system where your money is your employee. Wealthy people don't just ask, how much money do I have? They ask, how much is my money producing while I sleep? That's the mindset shift that separates accumulation from multiplication. The strategy is straightforward, but requires discipline and vision. When you earn profits, whether it's from your job, your side business, your investments, or even a small win, you don't stop there. You don't let that money sit in a savings account earning next to nothing. You reinvest it. You take what you've earned and put it into more income streams. That could mean putting profits from your small business back into marketing, inventory, or systems that expand reach. It could mean taking dividends from a stock and reinvesting them into more shares. It could mean using rental property, cash flow to buy another property. Multiplication requires that you resist the temptation to consume your profits and instead let them breed more profits. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had a friend who built a small business and did very well. Every time he made a profit, he bought something flashy, a new car, expensive clothes, vacations. And for a while, it looked like he was doing great. But a few years later, the business slowed, and because he never multiplied his profits into other streams, he had nothing left to fall back on. On the other hand, I knew another man who lived modestly. Every time his business produced profits, he reinvested half. He expanded slowly, built more systems, invested in property, diversified his streams. Years later, he didn't just have a business, he had an empire. That's the difference between spending, saving, and multiplying. Now, the practical step is one you can implement immediately. Take 50% of your profits this year, whether from a business, investments, or even unexpected windfalls, and put them into another asset class. If your money is in stocks, move some into real estate. If it's in business, put some into dividend-paying investments. If it's in savings, redirect part of it into a side hustle that can produce cash flow. The goal isn't to scatter your money randomly, it's to strategically multiply streams so that no one stream is your only source. Here's why this is so important. When you only accumulate, you're at risk. A savings account can vanish with one emergency. A single business can falter with one downturn. But when you multiply, you build resilience. You create a financial ecosystem where one stream feeds another, and the system keeps growing even if one piece slows down. That's how fortunes are built, not in a straight line, but in multiplication. So don't just save to feel secure, and don't just accumulate to feel rich. Put your money to work, let it multiply, and soon you'll discover that wealth isn't just what you have, it's what you've built that continues to grow without you. Because true freedom isn't about what you've stored, it's about what keeps multiplying long after you've stopped working. Here's the thing about wealth. If it ends with you, it was never really wealth, it was just money temporarily in your hands. True wealth is measured not only by what you earn during your lifetime, but by what continues to live, grow, and serve others when you're no longer here. Success isn't simply about the paycheck you cash, the car you drive, or the house you live in. It's about the legacy you leave behind. That's the philosophy that changes everything. When you realize that wealth can outlive you, you start thinking in decades instead of days. You stop chasing quick gains and start building structures that stand the test of time. I learned this early when I met people who were wealthy by the world standards but left nothing lasting when they passed. They had riches, yes, but their families inherited confusion instead of clarity, consumption instead of principles. On the other hand, I've also met men and women who weren't known publicly, didn't live flashy lives, but left behind businesses, investments, and values that kept their families secure for generations. That's when it struck me. Success is not only about what you build for yourself, but what you build that survives you. So the strategy becomes clear. Create systems that last beyond your lifetime. That could mean a business that runs without your daily involvement, properties that continue to produce income long after you're gone, or even principles you've documented and taught that your children can follow. It's not only about passing down dollars, it's about passing down disciplines. If you give your children money without wisdom, chances are they'll lose both. But if you give them wisdom, along with structures and assets, they can grow what you've started. Wealth that outlives you is built on two pillars: assets that keep producing and values that keep guiding. I'll give you a personal example. Early in my career, I realized that if I only worked for wages, my influence would die with my last paycheck. But if I built businesses, wrote down principles, created investments, and trained others, those things could continue to live on after me. And that's exactly what happened. The systems and teachings I created didn't just benefit me, they kept working, multiplying, and serving long after my personal effort was removed. That's the real measure of success, when what you've built no longer needs you to keep moving forward. Now here's the practical step, and it's something you can begin right now. Write down 3 principles or assets you want your family to inherit. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't wait until the end of your career. Start today. Maybe it's the principle of always paying yourself first. Maybe it's the discipline of avoiding lifestyle debt. Maybe it's the asset of a rental property, or a dividend portfolio, or a small business. Write them down, commit to them, and begin building them today. Because the earlier you start, the longer they'll have to grow, and the stronger the legacy you'll leave. Remember, money spent dies with you, but money multiplied and directed with wisdom can outlive you. And that's when success becomes more than survival. It becomes significance. If there's one investment that never fails, it's the investment you make in yourself. Money can be lost, businesses can go under, markets can shift, but the skills and mindset you've developed can never be taken from you. They are yours to keep, yours to refine, and yours to use in every season of life. That's the philosophy I discovered early on, that before I could accumulate wealth in my bank account, I had to accumulate wealth in my own mind. Because the truth is, you will never attract more than you've become. If your skills remain the same, your opportunities remain the same. If your thinking never changes, your results will never change. I remember when I was broke, not just financially, but mentally. The turning point wasn't when someone handed me money. It was when someone handed me a new idea, a new book, a new mentor, a new way of seeing the world. That was the spark. From that day, I realized that every dollar I put into my own growth multiplied itself far more than any stock or piece of property could. Because when I improved, everything around me improved. My work, my relationships, my influence, my ability to create value. The external always follows the internal. The strategy is simple, but not always easy. Continuously invest in personal development, health, and learning. Think of yourself as the engine that drives every result in your life. If the engine is neglected, even the best vehicle won't move. If your health fails, your wealth has little meaning. If your mind shrinks, your bank account will eventually follow. But when you prioritize your health, sharpen your skills, and renew your mind with new knowledge, you expand your capacity to create, to lead, and to build. The more capable you become, the more valuable you become to the marketplace. And remember, the marketplace always rewards value. I'll tell you a practical story. When I began earning a little more money, the temptation was to buy nicer things, to upgrade my lifestyle. But instead, I decided to dedicate a portion of my income to seminars, books, and courses. I spent money not just on things I could wear, but on ideas I could carry. And the return on that investment was extraordinary. A single principle I learned from a mentor multiplied my income tenfold because it changed the way I thought about opportunity. A single book shifted my perspective on discipline, and that discipline built the foundation for everything I created afterward. Looking back, I can tell you with certainty, the money I spent on self-investment has paid me far more than the money I spent on consumption. So here's the practical step, and it's non-negotiable if you're serious about wealth and freedom. Allocate at least 5% of your income every year to personal growth. Not once, not occasionally, but every year. Spend it on books, on courses, on mentors, on anything that stretches your mind and strengthens your skills. Make it a rule, just like paying your bills or saving for the future. And don't think of it as an expense, think of it as seed money. Because when you sow into yourself, you reap for a lifetime. Let me leave you with this. You can lose the house, you can lose the car, you can even lose the business. But if you've invested in yourself, you can always rebuild because the builder is intact. You are the ultimate asset. Treat yourself that way, and the dividends will follow you for the rest of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, as we bring this journey to a close, I want you to pause and reflect on what you've heard today. Wealth, freedom, and success are not distant dreams reserved for the few. They are the natural outcome of discipline, philosophy, and choices. It doesn't start with luck, and it doesn't begin with money. It begins with you. It begins with the decision to change your thinking, to train your mind, and to act on the principles that build assets instead of excuses. I've lived long enough to tell you this with certainty. The external world is only a mirror of the internal world. If you want more, you must become more. If you want freedom, you must first learn responsibility. If you want wealth, you must first learn discipline. The seeds of a rich life are planted not in the soil of circumstance, but in the soil of your daily philosophy. That's the difference between drifting and designing, between surviving and thriving. But none of this matters if you leave here today and continue as if nothing changed. Information without action is entertainment. Transformation only comes when you take what you've learned and put it into practice. So I'm asking you, don't wait for next week. Don't wait for the perfect time. Begin now. Write down those limiting beliefs and replace them with empowering ones. Start saving before you spend. Redirect a portion of your income into assets. Read the book. Take the course. Call the mentor. Do the small things consistently, because over time, the small things become the big results. And finally, remember this. Wealth is not just about money. True wealth is having the freedom to live life on your terms, the health to enjoy it, and the legacy to leave behind something greater than yourself. Money will give you options, but character will determine how you use those options. So build wisely, build patiently, and build with purpose. My call to you is simple. Take what you've learned and begin today. Plant the seed, nurture it daily, and one day, when you look back, you'll realize the life you designed was far greater than the life you once settled for. The path to wealth and freedom is not someday, it is today. It is now. It is yours.